So, years ago, as a little girl growing up, if you ask the question, do you want to be a woman or are you a woman? The answer is yes, because I've got the biological parts that makes me a woman. I have these emotional feelings and behavior that fits into the description of a woman. And so asking me that, the answer is a confident yes. But today, that question will have you thinking, and sometimes, honestly, also being very careful as to how you answer that question. And the question of am I a woman is not as straightforward as it was several years ago, even decades ago. Things have changed so much, and I think that we ask those questions in workplaces because today that question is not as straightforward anymore. And I think it's important that we discuss this big topic today to understand what does it actually mean to be a woman in the workplace. And as much as this might be an uncomfortable topic to discuss because of the politicalness of it all, I think that we should still feel comfortable discussing it. I'm not sitting here with some in-depth knowledge as to the different terminologies or descriptions around how you can describe a woman based on her gender, but it still helps to have these discussion points. As even with me being in HR, I may not have that full scope or full knowledge of how to adequately describe people based on the identity that they go by. Today we'll discuss what it actually means to be a woman in the workplace, legally speaking, and also how can managers handle this respectfully, fairly, and without getting into legal hot water. This has become a hot topic because recently the UK's highest court, which is the Supreme Court, made an important decision. They said that the 2010 Equality Act, and this Equality Act is the main law that protects against discrimination in the UK, stated or confirmed that when it talks about woman or sex, it means biological sex. So in simple terms, it means that the sex that you were born with, and that's how you are described as a woman. So following this decision has brought up a lot of questions, because now even if someone has a gender recognition certificate, GRC, and that's a legal document saying that they are female, for certain protections, the law still sees them based on their biological sex. Do you see what I mean? So for some people, they've actually already started making changes to their body, and they've got the certificate to state that they are female. And so it really has raised a lot of questions as to what that means for them going forward. However, note this, and this is important, trans people are still protected by the law. So it is illegal to discriminate against someone for changing their gender, and this is called gender reassignment protection. So what is the problem? This creates a real challenge for workplaces. How to protect women's rights without excluding trans colleagues? And that's the balancing act. So consider this scenario. Say you manage a team. You've got Alice, a trans woman, and Mia, a biological woman. Both want to use the woman's changing rooms. So before this court ruling, you may have said, sure, Alice can use the woman's facilities. Alice, the transgender, can use the woman's facilities. But now with this court ruling, if you only offer mixed use spaces, so anyone can use those spaces, Mia, the woman, could say her legal rights to a single space, which is the space for only biological women, isn't being respected. Are you following me? At the same time, if you stop Alice or you do not create an alternative, you risk discriminating against her because of gender reassignment. So it is a tough spot, and it can be uncomfortable or awkward depending on how you're dealing with it. However, it's okay to admit it's confusing, and I think this is so important to admit that we don't know it all, we don't have all the answers, but that's why we need to talk about this. So let's talk about this ruling and how it helps and at the same time complicate matters. Why it helps is that, one, it gives clear rules for workplaces like gyms, hospitals, or women's shelters to offer women-only spaces. So let's look at the positive around that. The other point is that it also strengthens protections for biological women, especially in sensitive areas. The third is that it reduces the legal confusion in women's sports or support groups, because the fairness around this was also fiercely debated. And so how this complicates things is that now trans people might feel unsure about where they are allowed to go and to be. And also, managers are now left figuring this out with no clear guidance yet. And third point is that if this is handled poorly, this could create tensions and hurt workplace relationships. And it can be confused. And I've already talked about how this is confusing and complicated. And I understand that this affects a lot of people, so it's no laughing matter. But I do want to keep this positive and light so that we focus more around solving the problem. And for managers, people leaders, even for us in HR, it's like being asked to create that, perfect cake, but we're not sure what the recipe is going to be, but you're responsible if it goes wrong. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, let's not panic. Here's how managers can handle this with care and confidence. So the first is to review your policies. Make sure your workplace rules on dignity and harassment clearly protect both biological sex rights and gender reassignment rights. And this helps protect everyone. The second is that if you can, offer different facilities. We've done it before, we'll be able to do it again. And that means providing separate spaces for biological men and women, and providing gender-neutral, lockable private spaces for anyone who prefers privacy. The third point is train your managers. It's something I always refer to when it comes to the solutions to people problems, because the managers have that great influence. Don't assume that managers know how to handle these situations, so you need to train them. Even for us who have a bit more awareness and knowledge around this, there's still some learning to do around it. So train your managers, your leaders on respect, inclusion, and the new legal expectation. Fourth is to communicate with care. If you're making changes, explain why. Focus on fairness, dignity, and inclusion for all team members. So the communication piece needs to be carefully thought through and carefully worded. The fifth is to stay updated. The Equality and Human Rights Commission, which is the EHRC, and that's the UK body that gives official guidance on equality, they are preparing more advice around this, so keep an eye out for that. The thing is that there are changes taking place in employment law, and so you have to keep up to date with all these changes. So is the question, am I a woman? Simple? No, not anymore. But as managers and leaders, our role isn't to judge, it is to lead with fairness and care. It's okay not to have all the answers straight away. Staying silent or ignoring the issue, that's not okay. So keep learning, stay human, stay curious. That's so important. These are important qualities. And remember, you can respect people's privacy by having good policies and practical spaces. It solves a lot more than politics ever will. Now, if this gave you a new perspective on leadership and how to handle these sensitive issues in the workplace, give it a like and share with another manager, HR professional, or a leader. Now, these are important conversations to have to make workplace better. Thank you for watching. Join the Mayday Manager membership community for more in-depth conversations around issues like this, and keep making progress with care.